Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clive Posselt with the Realization Group, and thank you for joining our webinar today on best practice approaches to reference data cost and usage management. We've some great minds in the space with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. So first off, Marc, could you just introduce yourself and give us a bit of your background, please?
Yes, Clive, thank you. Pleasure and welcome, everyone. My name is Marc Michels. I'm the MD for our international business. Have been with TRG Screen for 5 years now.
Amjad, next to you, please.
Thanks, Clive. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Amjad Zoghbi. I am one of the founders of Expansion. We founded the company around 10 years ago now in 2013, and since January this year, we're now part of the TRG group. I am now responsible for sales and business development for Xmon.
And last but not least, John, if you could just give us your penny's worth as well, please.
Thanks everyone. So John Hunt, Chief Technology Officer of Lansdowne Partners London. Been with Lansdowne for a number of years, and prior to that did various buy side and sell side roles. So topic very close to my heart. To you, Clive.
I can imagine. Thank you very much indeed, sir. So the agenda for today, we're going to have an introduction from Marc, then we'll go on to some best practices around the reference data cost and usage management with Amjad, and thereafter, John and I are going to have a conversation around how they've implemented their management tools and how that has helped their business. So Marc, a bit of an introduction from you, please, sir.
Yes, thank you, Clive. And as we are looking at this slide, I want to give some context related to the subject of today's webinar. If we look at TRG Screen, we are a holistic and integrated platform where optimized spend is really at the core of that platform. And that is where you hold all your contracts and your vendor agreements in one centralized store. Obviously, this helps you to proactively manage all your contracts from a renewal and a spend standpoint. As you would expect, optimized spend is fully integrated with our analytics and BI engine, really to give you full transparency and to help you with your reporting internally and with your business. But optimized spend is also fully integrated with your accounting and accruals, really to help you with better forecasting, your budgeting, and also your allocations. In addition, we give you access to a full subledger that where you can do all your accruals, both for your internal as well as your external allocations. The platform is fully integrated also with our usage management for all your reference data. Really, that is the subject of today's webinar, and more on that in a second. But also your web-based subscriptions are fully integrated through our Research Monitor application. In addition to that, risk and compliance, really helping you and assisting you with your vendor and exchange reporting, hopefully helping you to avoid any kind of backbilling from your vendors or exchanges, or even worse, potential fines. Now, wrapped around all these services and our platform are our managed services. We have at TRG Screen a global team of market data experts that are focused on proactively managing your expense and undertaking all of your non-core tasks. Almost all my colleagues at TRG Screen, we have a background in market data. We worked as market data administrators or market data managers. So we understand your day-to-day business challenges. Many of us come from the vendor or the exchange side as well. So for TSG Screen, we are and we remain 100% focused on market data and the financial services market space. That's our domain. That's where we feel comfortable, and that's where we want to add value to you in your day-to-day business. I think, Clive, I hand it back to you here.
Thank you very much, sir. I think I like the idea that you've also been your own clients at some point in the past, so you know what it's like on the other side. Brilliant, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Amjad, you know, some ideas about best practice in the market and what's been going on of late, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Clive. Thank you, Mark. I'll take around 10 minutes to talk about the best practices that we've really seen and learned over the last 10 years doing what we do, helping organizations better manage what we call better manage reference data usage and spend. This is the outline of what we'll go through today, or what I'll go through today. I'll first start by defining what we mean by reference data, just a contextualization here, and what are the general pain points we see for reference data management. I'll then take a simple view of an organization and then go through the practical aspects of how different teams deal with reference data and what ultimately are the consequences of poor reference data management. Then I'll talk about organizational objectives for reference data management. I'll try to talk about why it's important to be proactive when managing reference data. And finally, I'll close the part by going through best practices. Actually, we've picked up 3. There are much more than that, but we've picked up 3 to talk about today. The ones that we think are the most impactful for reference data management, and how Xmon can help companies effectively address those. Before we go any deeper, just a quick definitions here. So when we talk about reference data in this presentation, we'll be referring to data that is non-streaming, so data that can be stored and reused in the organization. So companies typically acquire this data from external vendors, store it, and reuse it inside the organization. It's data that is in contrast to streaming or delayed data feeds, or data feeds that come into the terminals as well. Now, reference data, we know it's expensive. It generally accounts for around 10 to 30% of the overall market data budget. In large organizations, we're talking double-digit multi-millions in absolute value. So certainly these are not negligible amounts, and even in smaller organizations, they tend to take a big part of the budgets and the market data budget in particular. Now, in addition to this, commercial models by which this data is provided are complex. The vendors will have different ways of charging for data. Some of them will have metered, pay-as-you-go products. Others will have fixed deals, fixed enterprise deals. Some of them might have volume-based agreements, and some of them will combine or have them all at the same time. So it gets pretty complex here as well. Finally, reference data is bound by usage and licensing agreements, which can be very complex too. Clients need to be sure they are accessing and using data correctly and according to usage and licensing agreements. To make matters even more complex, some data aggregators will provide data as pass-through. So clients can access the data, but then they might get a call from a creator or the source of the actual data, inquiring about the usage of this data, and we have to explain how this is used or report on its usage. So overall, it's a pretty complex setup, a pretty complex picture, and it's not getting simpler.
Yeah, I think as we discussed before, it's a bit of buyer beware there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the way we view things and the way we fundamentally see where the difficulty really lies in is that in most of the time, reference data is passively managed. So activity will happen during the month, and then clients will get an invoice or receive an invoice at the end of the month, look at the numbers, pay the invoice, and that's basically what this all boils down to. And we think we should be doing better. We should be targeting those budgets in a better way, addressing them and managing them to what we call in a more proactive fashion. We'll talk a bit more about this towards the end of that, but fundamentally, like most organizations, will be passive or very passive in that respect. In this slide, I'll try to illustrate very simply a typical organization. I think it's important to make a clear distinction between managing usage and spend, which is on the right-hand side here, and managing data itself. These are really two broad categories of data management. The first one is about managing the actual data. So looking at the data itself, it's the quality of the data, the availability of the data, the timeliness of the data, and so on. In financial organizations, this aspect is usually the responsibility of the consumers themselves, the data consumers, the IT teams, and what we call really the business functions. As market data teams, we are more likely to be involved in managing reference data usage and spend. And this is really what this presentation is going to focus on. Now, of course, depending on the organization, that might or might not be the same team, but we're kind of splitting those functions and splitting those teams here. Again, for simplicity now, these two functions or these two teams will need to communicate. So for example, data consumers can ask the market data team about the cost of a particular request. How much would this cost us if we were to send it out? They might ask whether the usage is compliant to certain licensing terms. The market data team can and should ask data consumers whether they need a particular request. Perhaps it's expensive, maybe it's not compliant, and they should be able to provide recommendations for optimizing usage and spend. Now, the problem we see is that this communication is generally not very efficient because it's complex, because there's lots of data to process, the amounts of information to deal with is very high, and typically clients don't have the tools to properly manage it. So we might see Excel spreadsheets, we might see things that are hacked into the organization, but the reality is it's very complex and it's not very efficient the way things are done traditionally. Without the proper principles that we will be talking about today, we will end up with high operational risks, costs will increase, there will be no budgeting capabilities or forecasting capabilities. We might be accessing data in a non-compliant way. As you can imagine, there will be very low efficiencies. If organizations wanted to allocate spend, it's very difficult to do this. Extracting reports or making sense of the data is very slow. Yes, we might be able to do something, but it might take us weeks or more. And by the time we get the results, the business has moved on. So it's really not ideal. And this also drives reduced ability to take decisions because we've got poor facts or data to drive those decisions inside the organization. Now, that's a simplified view. Before we talk about what we mean by, or before we talk about the best principles for managing reference data, just talk a little bit about why we would like to do that. Now, these are the objectives that we set or we see or we talk about with clients. Firstly, we want to enhance efficiency. We want to make sure that we understand our spend. We want to make sure that we know why consumers are accessing data. We want to optimize costs, of course. That's a big topic that we hear and talk about, but not just reduce spend once. We want to make sure that once we reduce it, we keep it under control. We need to enhance accountability as well. This is all part of the governance area, making sure that our invoices are reconciled. We can generate audit reports in a timely way, follow up any tasks within the organization, as in recommendations for usage and compliance. And of course, ensure compliance. Nobody does not want to be compliant. We want to capture any non-compliant calls. We need to report on usage clearly and effectively as well. So this is why we would like to do or properly manage reference data. Now, doing this will lead us to, again, reduced operational risk, increasing the efficiency within the organization itself so we can understand spend and build reports in a timely way, and improve our decision-making processes. Now, we've highlighted here 3 principles that we think can help achieve those objectives. So firstly, it is important to change the dynamic of reference data management. So shift away from the passive or traditional way of passively managing reference data to a more proactive approach. This means tracking actively consumers in real time, monitoring non-production calls, creating benchmarks on usage, and this will allow us to create alerts for abnormal usage, whether it's abnormal cost or abnormal compliance calls. Doing this will help us address the objectives of optimizing spend, enhancing efficiency, and ensuring compliance. Now, Xmon helps organizations of all sizes. We have a very modern technical stack that can process data in high volumes in real time, provide analytics in real time, provide alerts in real time, and help identify whether certain calls are non-compliant or too costly. We can also, depending on the usage cases, we can also potentially block non-compliant calls if we have to do that using our rules engine. The next objective here is making sure that we don't just cover one particular data source or one particular data vendor. It's important to be very detailed in the vendors that we provide, but focus also on the wider aspect of things. So be as comprehensive as we can. This helps us make sure everybody's accountable, potentially even helps us track data consumption within the organization itself to help us reduce our spend, enhance the efficiency, accountability, and ensure compliance of usage of data within the organization. Now, Xmon addresses this. Xmon is natively multi-vendor. We can add vendors to the platform as a setup to the system. We've got many clients using several vendors implemented and onboarded into the application. We also have partnerships in the industry. These are typically around data mastering systems, so we can leverage those partnerships to reduce implementation time and to push the analytics even further, so clients can track data sources internally and provide even deeper insights within how data is used in the organization. And finally, it's important to increase communication or collaboration between the teams. So that interaction of the teams we talked about earlier, being able to answer the questions in a timely way, forecasting numbers, running what-if scenarios, running simulations, allocating spend in a clear way is very important. This is what starts to drive interesting conversations within the business, ultimately leading to reduced spend, improved compliance, and enhancing accountability in the companies that we talk to. Now, to do this, we need advanced analytics. As I mentioned earlier, Xmon's got very powerful calculation engines that create those analytics in real time. They can be very low level audit and compliance reports, but also we can generate higher level aggregated results to very quickly and very simply add value by building those reports for management or audit and compliance purposes. We also have advanced simulations engine, dashboards where clients can build the reports they'd like to see, everything integrated into the platform itself. And I think very importantly as well, clients that do sign up to Xmon will get access to what we call Xmon Insights as part of the package. Xmon Insights is a service delivered by our analysts that are experts in reference data commercial models and compliance requirements across different vendors. So they act as an extension of the client's teams to answer questions at any time around usage, costs, compliance, accountability, allocations, and all of that. So that is part of the service that we add to client, again, to contextualize those recommendations, to put them into the client's context, and to have recommendations that are the most impactful to allow us to better manage reference data. Clive, that's all I have. On this one, over to you.
Thank you very much. That was a very, very comprehensive overview. And I think the drill down on those best practices at the end, even though it was the sort of top three, was very, very useful. John, can I come to you? You've been working with the team for a little while now. In your view, how important is it to actively manage reference data, and how's Xmon helped you achieve benefits at Lansdowne Partners?
Yeah, thanks, Clive. And tell me if I'm too quiet because I'm in a booth, as you've probably seen. It's so really interesting product. Just to bring it to life. For Amjad, slide to slide, but the reality is we run a fairly sensible tech stack here: portfolio management system, order management system, and a data warehouse. And now that last bit, when I joined Lansdowne, I'd never really done much of data warehouses, and the other name for them could be data eating monsters, because
I've come across a couple of those before.
It's as soon as you get out of an order management system needs a ticker and a price. Yeah, brilliant. The portfolio management system might have to process a corporate action. Yeah, brilliant, fine, whatever. Data warehouses, they want everything. And I had a problem with market data consumption. As you said, it's buyer beware. We use Bloomberg here exclusively, so if you don't use it, it's the only one I can talk to. Very sophisticated, good solid data set, but it's an enterprise solution. You're not going. They will handhold you a little bit, but ultimately you're a sophisticated consumer of a sophisticated product, and if you're pulling down tens and tens of thousands of data points per day, which we are, suddenly you can end up with huge data license bills. And I see one of you said, I don't know if that's from the earlier webinar, you try and put it into Excel, and we tried to put all this into Excel, and it breached the Excel row limit. I mean, we couldn't even do it in Excel. You had to do it in like 4 Excels and join them together. You've all tried it. We've all been there, right? And we ran out of Excel, and so new Amjad and the team had built this and just said, hey, can you help us? And they really did. They gave me instant transparency on where all the calls were coming from, which of the 3 systems were making the calls, which were the expensive ones. So in terms of it important, if you didn't do it and you have a certain size, scale, and nature, your CFO is going to come and get you because you've spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on market data that you didn't need to. So you're constantly being asked to reassess your spend. But yeah, the way it was, where we came across it as well was perfect for us, because we didn't want a full market data management suite. It was too much. We're not that complex. We don't have a real-time problem. We had a static problem.
How important, I know you've said, you've got a CFO that roams the building looking for people spending money. How do you think, how important is it to really actively track that spend and understand the real granular usage and visibility and transparency across different parts of the organization?
Yeah, it's, I mean, we're lucky in some ways, but in other ways, we run various different portfolios here, different portfolio managers, and they might run different markets. And it's all public. We've recently acquired an asset manager, and they brought with them a new region, a new investable region, Asia ex Japan. We didn't have that really on our books, and so suddenly, how do I explain an increase in spend or a decrease in spend on data license? Or how do we even measure this? And so any kind of
it's that importance of spend reduction and control, isn't it?
Yeah, no one wants to. CFO, he's actually really nice, the CFO here, but it's my job as well to make sure we're not, frankly, wasting money on data. And as much as your data vendor will love you for spending lots, it's kind of you need to. They don't necessarily provide the tools to monitor your spend, which seems like a gap to me. But hey, Xmon exists, and yeah. So there's a couple of things where if you're in this situation whereby yes, you've got multi kind of different portfolios, or there's some business change, or you really just you don't want to have to hire a headcount to look at this, because that's expensive, and it's what else are they going to do? Maybe you don't quite cross that threshold for being a dedicated headcount. I'm sure some of the bigger firms, I know my old shop definitely had teams and teams of people. We don't, and so you don't want the market data management suite. And then it's the second side of it is you might have someone who's like, I must have betas for every single one of my stocks against every single index that's ever existed, and you're like, oh yeah, hello, that's going to cost a fortune, and it's almost a case of, well, we can do that, but it's going to cost $50,000 to do. It's going to be very, very expensive. And like, well, when I meant every index forever, I meant these two and take these time periods, and so you can promise everyone everything and deliver whatever you want from a market data perspective, but it's suddenly trying to transfer back from just the market data interfaces what you're going to spend is very hard without something like an Xmon, as you said.
Yeah, I can imagine. We talked about the expertise of the team and how they proactively help customers. Can you expand a little bit on the Xmon Insights solution and how that has helped you with maybe as a little bit of an extension of your team there at Lansdowne?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a smart team of business analysts here, but they have a busy day, and so we get these great emails out of Xmon. It kind of shows you monthly spend tracking month on month. So if you see a spike, you're like, well, what's that? Was there a reason? Yes, there wasn't. Yes, there was. No, there wasn't. There was a mistake, or something's happened, or we changed something. So you get these kind of regular emails, automated emails out of the system, and then you occasionally get one of these magic kind of soft consulting emails from Amjad or Christoph or one of the BAs at Xmon saying, hey, John, did you know you're requesting the same data 17 different times in 4 different systems and it's the same? And you're like, yeah, I didn't know that. And why would you? Because sometimes your vendors in your portfolio management system vendors, as nice as they are, they might just make a mistake and turn on an extra data pool like they didn't need to, or forget to turn off an old one if you've closed a fund, or open a fund, which where you've got a kind of business change. And yeah, it's kind of what called soft consulting. They sort of keep an eye on it for you, which is really nice. Yeah, it works really well.
That's definitely helpful by the sound of things. Moving on a little bit, so when you started with the platform, how long did it take to start realizing benefits?
Yeah, integration is look, just before I became a CTO, I was like, this is easy. Integration takes no time at all. I've learned the hard way that's totally not true. Except in this instance, actually, you can integrate Xmon.
There's always
passively.
an outlier.
Yeah, well, really, you can integrate it passively. I'm talking from a Bloomberg and generic off-the-shelf systems here, so extrapolate as you see fit. You can integrate it passively, where it takes Bloomberg were very like, they're not taking our data. It's like, it's not taking your data. We're not sending them your data. It takes a kind of a metadata of what you requested. So they were like, they were okay with that, right? They get great. You're trying to check what you're spending. So the passive integration means you're not introducing any kind of extra wheel to your system. So we've elected for that for most of our systems. It works very well. Or you can have active integration where Xmon sits in line, whether it's we only use the RESTful and AFTP connectors, which are the common ones, I think. And it can be an active connection, and it works immediately. You can backload a couple of request files as well if you want some history, but then it starts polling what you're spending and adding its calculation layer on top of your request files. So it's really cool in that regard. And then there's another part where you can create essentially a dummy adapter on top of your main adapter, so you don't have to hand over your P12 to someone you're doing a proof of concept with. You can say, use this adapter, and it will pass straight through Xmon off the data license, come straight back, and then you can tweak that adapter. You can delete it, reissue the certificate, change the password, and then you can create as many of those as you want. And you can do it yourself, and it takes 2 minutes to do. So yeah, no, it's don't be scared of approaching it, even if you don't want it to touch anything. It will just passively absorb the data and start to tell you what you're doing across, for us, three core separate systems, all sending it different request files, which it then ties together and uses the same netting logic that Bloomberg imposed on the billing model.
Sounds like pretty easy to integrate. How about time to value?
Yeah, it's so you're probably wondering, why didn't I just buy this, sign up for a month and go, thanks, Amjad, that was great. I learned so much. Here's your termination notice. It's if you've got any sort of change in your business, or you're adding new markets, you're changing systems, I found it's very sensibly priced, actually. And for our kind of level of size, scale, and nature, which we're not huge, we're not that complex, it's constantly keeping us in check. And we've saved, I don't even know the number, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, just through being careful with this system. So yeah, time to value is infinite, Clive. You can check my maths on that, but it's really useful as an ongoing subscription. It's not just it's not like a consultancy. Here, you're doing all this wrong, fix it, and we'll see you never.
Yeah, and walk away.
It's kind of a rolling benefit.
Constantly iterative process. Yeah. I suppose last thing I wanted to ask you was, what would you say is the most important functionality for you?
Yeah. So it's probably the three things. It's ability to tell you your spend transparently. The second one's not a function, it's people. It's a soft consulting, which is great because they really do understand how all these things work. And I think that the third part is really this ability to create these ad hoc adapters. John Hunt test, who's created that, but you can do that if you know that the thing you're testing might go off the rails or request tons of data. You can actually, even Amjad can correct me, you can stop it. So if it takes more than $500, chop it, stop it. So it's a bit like a kind of nice little stop loss on your market data. So yeah, in a nutshell, those are three things I find most useful about the Xmon product.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, John. That was really insightful to get a user's feel of how the product works, and also how it can really help you manage that that tracking and spend analysis. We've got a number of questions that have been coming in, so if we can move on to the Q&A session now and answer some questions that are coming in from people. First one I've got here, and excuse me, I'm just reading it on the screen. We are a rather large organization, and aligning stakeholders to implement change isn't easy. Do you have any experience dealing with large firms? And if so, what's your view on best practices learned there? Is that one that you can pick up on, Amjad?
Sure. So large organizations, I mean, things might be a little bit slower in larger organizations. They're much more complex in their nature, of course, as the question is alluding to now. We are used to dealing with larger firms. I think the key here is to, again, talking about the delivering value, is showing how we can provide all of this information or this value, analytics, reports, recommendations very quickly. And we've got ways to implement this in organizations of all sizes, but in particular for large organizations, I think it's important to start with an area, a controlled area. We don't need to boil the ocean from the get-go. Find a team, or find a set of vendors or accounts, or just a scope, and start there. Show the value within the organization, and then navigate around. I think that's the key component, I think, for larger firms. With Xmon, we've worked with, again, organizations of all sizes, from hedge funds to asset management firms to the largest banks in the world. So we know how this works, and happy to take this separately and explain in a bit more detail how we do that. But I think the key really is to start small and expand from there.
Yeah, I think that I'd be interested to hear your point there, John. You've obviously worked at large organizations before. That theory of start with something relatively basic and expand rather than trying to boil the ocean on day one. Does that resonate with you?
So we actually took our reference call for Xmon from a much larger organization than ourselves, like materially larger, and they had dipped their toe in. They initiated it for one system in passive mode, very, very low risk, very, trial commercials, and then by the time we took the reference, it was doing the intermediation or disintermediation, and they'd gone full in, and so I guess sorry, it's pretty obvious stuff, but the fact that you can, if you're trying to convince someone for big spend, actually it's almost a kind of a low spend and potentially a massive reduction in costs. So, and then you can scale it up from there, and take your time with the integration. So nothing else from me, Clive.
No, that's fine. I think that sounds like the best option. Moving on, does the system report pass-through attributes? For example, third-party data sold through a data aggregator, which is bound by licensing terms. I think I'll come back to you again on that, Amjad.
Sure, that's a question we actually get a lot, actually more and more over the last few years. I think this is really related to the compliance aspect of things. How can we know if we're requesting data that's compliant? How can we be sure that we won't get a call from a third-party vendor somewhere saying we've downloaded this data from this aggregator, and we now need to be mindful of the licensing arrangements here. Organizations really don't like surprises, and I think this is true for cost and especially true for compliance. So with Xmon, what we can do is two things with that regard. The first one is reporting on data attributes across the board. So if we have an aggregator, we know exactly which fields are coming from the vendor, but also third-party providers too. That's a report in the system that we can generate. But also, for a more real-time alerting side of things, Xmon is able to pick up those fields, and if a consumer sends a request out with certain attributes that should be bound by licensing agreements, then the market data team will know about this immediately. So we can raise an alert for that, and that gets picked up immediately and can be actioned proactively, again, coming back to the proactive aspect of reference data management. So certainly something that we look into with clients around the compliance aspect of things.
No, that's a great answer, and it sounds very, very comprehensive. Marc, I'm going to come to you with the next one, if that's all right. Somebody asking, can we explain in a bit more detail what the Xmon Insight service actually delivers? I know we've touched a little bit on it before, but if you could go into it a bit more deeply to just answer this inquiry that's come in.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good question, and I'll look at Amjad as well to further complement what I'm saying. But I think knowing that there is a team of specialists available that really know the complexity of reference data that is accessible to you. If you look at the market we are active in, we are all extremely busy. If you look at the large organizations, yes, they might have a larger market data team, a lot of specialism, but they're very, very busy. And the business demands the use of data. They want quick answers. And I think knowing that there is a team, an insights team available that understands the specifics of reference data, that is actually very proactive and sometimes already reaches out to you, as we just heard as well. Hey, there is a spike. We can explain that this is what has happened. If you want to do it all yourself, fine, you can do that. But we know, and we see that constantly in our space, smaller, mid-sized firms, they might not even have this kind of specialism around easily available, or we are very, very, very busy already to do our core tasks. So I think having that insights team available, knowing it's there, puts a lot of, or adds a lot of value to the whole proposition that Xmon is giving you.
Amjad, do you want to say anything more about the Insights service?
Absolutely. I mean, Marc has hit the nails on the head here. I think clients are really busy, and they want to be proactive about management. They want to look into systems. They want to look into reports. But what the Xmon Insights really team does is, again, act as an extension of them. So it gives them more bandwidth, but also we're experts in reference data, commercial models, compliance requirements, and we see how this works, and we understand how companies work and how companies ask for data. So I think it's also about the Xmon Insights team asking those questions internally, but asking the right questions to have an impact and to be able to provide those recommendations to the firm. So when we say we act as an extension of the client's teams, it's being really part of the organization, or feeling part of the organization, to be able to understand how these firms need and use data to be able to provide the recommendations on compliance, cost optimization, and everything else that we do. And it's been a very successful addition to the system, and all clients will have access to it as part of the product.
Thanks very much indeed. I think that's a good insight into good insight to insights. You know what I'm talking about. I've got another one coming here. It says, "Hello, Clive. Can you ask Amjad to discuss how the solution operates technically once in production? The use case is clear. Can you give some more detail around the technical operation?"
The technical aspect of things. So where to start? So with Xmon, there's different ways to integrate. And again, we come back to the point of time to value. What we want to try to achieve with clients is get value out of the system as quickly as possible. And we have, over the years, been able to design the technical aspects of the integration to be able to do that exactly. So provide time to value as quickly as possible. Now, some clients would like to have a listening mode. So have a look at how our requests are sent, or at our requests internally and externally, and give us some analytics on that. And we can do that. Some clients would like to have a bit more control, so potentially blocking requests or actively monitoring calls, and we've got another option for that too. The system itself is very transparent in terms of its impact and the organization. Again, coming back to the point of the least impact to the firms, the smallest technical footprint, and we've got many ways to do this. Also, technically, I think many clients might ask questions around IT security, compliance, all of these things. And again, having worked with organizations of many different sizes. We've got all the white papers and the security requirements to address those too. So again, that might be a bit high level at this point, but happy to pick this up on a more detailed call if you'd like.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Last question coming in is that we've got time for. With the recent acquisition, are there any plans for integration? If so, can you talk through which elements they might be? Marc, Amjad, which of you want to pick up on that one?
Marc, do you want to give this a
yeah, I can take a first step on that, and please fill me in, Amjad. Obviously, sure. Before the acquisition of Expansion, we have been long-term partners, so we know each other very well. And we at TRG Screen, we have always seen the extreme power of the Xmon service that it can offer to our clients. So the acquisition is still very, very recent, as you all know, and we are at the designing boards to look at further integration. There are lots of opportunities to do so. And one of the reasons for the acquisitions is that we, of course, see those opportunities. We see much more that we can deliver in the future together as a fully integrated part of our platform that I spoke about earlier. So maybe a little bit early to go through a number of bullet points in a very concrete and descriptive way, but rest assured that the blueprints are already there and in design. Amjad?
Something to add, Amjad?
No, absolutely. I think again, they are very complementary solutions. I think there's value to integrate, but also there's value to keep Xmon as a separate solution. So that's absolutely going to be the case for clients that would like to have Xmon. It's going to be there, but for clients that opt for the wider coverage, there will be integrations. We are on the drawing board, as Marc said, certainly with the idea of improving user experience. So why do things in two places? For example, if a user loads something in Optimize spends, that would trickle down to Xmon and vice versa. We don't need to be doing or repeating the actions. Maybe in terms of the reporting capabilities, have everything centralized for clients, again, that have the different systems. So early days, but very exciting times, I think.
Yeah, sounds like watch this space.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time here. So what I'd love to do is just go around the room and just get some last thoughts and comments from each of you. If I could start with you, Marc, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Clive. Again, I think my closing remark would be along the lines of many of us we're consuming reference data, and it's an element of cost, part of our total market data cost that continues to increase. There's a lot of demand from the business for reference data, and many of us have experiences trying to keep control over that ourselves. I would say, and I hope this webinar today has really been helpful for that. Really consider a buy or build solution. Time to value, ROI is extremely critical in our business, and I hope that became clear during today's presentation.
That's great. Thanks very much, Marc. John, are you able to give us a couple of wise words at the end here?
Hi, Clive. Look, market data is a cost of doing business. You can't operate without it. But then there's no need to kind of fly blind. You'll know if this usage case applies to you, having listened to this, and I think it would be pretty clear if it's something that will benefit you. So yeah, have a look.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. And last but not least, Amjad, any couple of last comments?
Sure. I mean, I hope the presentation, of course, was useful. Reference data is complex in of itself, but it doesn't have to be complicated to manage. I think we've been helping organizations for a long time decouple, open up that black box. It doesn't have to be called the black art of reference data management, as we've sometimes heard it. It's now possible to be in control, to be proactively tracking, managing, and understanding and optimizing reference data. So if we can help in any way, we're here to do that.
That's brilliant. Well, many thanks to everybody for joining today. And I'd really like to thank all our participants, John, Amjad, and Marc, for their insights. And in case anybody would like any further information, please reach out to the team at TRG Screen, and they'll be very, very happy to help you. So on that note, John, Amjad, Marc, thank you very much indeed for your time. Great insights, really good conversation. And everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Thanks
to all.
No.
Good to speak.
Bye.
Bye.